Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to introduce my today's special guest, Mr. Günther Fechlinger, who is the prominent expert and activist for European integration and the Ukraine in European Union, and one of the most active participants of Free Nations of Russia Dismantlement Forum. So thank you, Mr. Fechlinger, for joining this interview today.
I'm very happy to be with you in your show.
Okay, Mr. Fechlinger, let's start with the last question about dismantlement of Russia. I'm following the news. Unfortunately, I haven't found Russia dismantled, even though you are busy with this question almost for a year. So many panels have passed, many events have passed in different countries, in US, in London, in Brussels. So, and still Russia exists and even gain $500 billion from shipping gas and oil to European Union. So what is happening? Why Russia hasn't been dismantled so far?
Look, dismantling Russia is basically a self-dismantling of Russia. That means that I'm actively encouraging the self-determination of the peoples inside the Russian Federation. So I'm calling them and I'm supporting all of them from Chechnya to Karelia to Buryatia to work actively on their independence. It was one of the prime mistakes in world history of the free world that we have not supported Chechenian independence in '94. And we have, in the moment, the opportunity will come again, because the Russian regime under Putin will crumble. Its last friends is Iran and some kind of terror regimes. They, of course, try to set the whole world on fire now, the Russians, with the various wars they are trying to start or they are starting. But they are very dangerous and also a capable enemy. So we have to be prepared. But our strategy must be, once Russia is crumbling, we have to support the dismantlement. The unity of Russia cannot be our objective in this war. We must make sure that we work towards the independence of the emerging states. Will it be 41? Will it be 20? I'm not, I say it's the best to have 41 new states, but will it be 20? That we will see. But definitely when the moment comes, we have to prepare world opinion for this moment. And that's what we are doing. Obviously, I also don't know if it will be 2024, 2025. But seriously, nobody can believe that the Putin regime will go on for another 2 mandates as nothing happened after all the horrible crimes they have committed in Ukraine and globally. They are really a terror regime. And so this is normally, this crumbles, and they don't have the industrial, fiscal, monetary capacity to sustain such a terrible war of attrition. Of course, they can use all the Soviet material. Of course, they can force a lot of people from Russia into their death in Ukraine, which they do. And they can sustain it maybe for another year, maybe for 2 years. But in the long term, when it comes to 5 years, it's impossible for such a small economy to sustain such a terrible war. And for us, we are the West, we are the free world. We can sustain the war effort for years to come if it's necessary, because there is no way of any kind of compromise. There is no way of any kind of peace of submission. We must work until victory, and victory is in the moment when the Russian system crumbles and they stop the war effort. And that moment will be also the question for the succession of the Putin regime. And we shall not go to another failure of a maybe Yeltsin regime. We must then say Russia has failed. Russia has started attack on world peace, has committed such horrendous crimes. So the logic is Russia will be dismantled like the Austrian Empire, like the Russian Empire was, and like the Ottoman Empire, like the German Empire. After wars of aggression, the punishment must be the dismantlement. And this is my case here. And for this, we need, of course, to prepare world opinion, because the reason why Ukraine has not won in 2023 already is not that you were not fighting very brave, and because your men and your women on the front, they were fighting very bravely and very smartly and successfully. but you didn't get enough weapons because the Americans and the Western powers have not given you all the weapons they have, because they are afraid that Russia is crumbling, because they want to have a united Russia afterwards. And this is the whole reason, because you could have easily had the F-16, you could have easily had enough tanks, you could have easily enough ships, easily enough ammunitions, because we have it, but we didn't give it to you because we want to have a united Russia afterwards, and we don't want a complete defeat of Russia. And so in this dilemma we are at the moment. And so you were fighting very bravely, you had some success, but the ultimate success of full liberation has not come because we didn't deliver you enough. So we have to really break this mantra in the Western policy thinking in Washington and in Brussels, that we have to find some accommodation with Russia because it's a superpower. In reality, Russia is a disaster power, and Russia is a very threat to world peace. And this we need to convince, and then we need also to have a plan for post-Putin Russia. And this cannot be a federal kind of free Russia, which I always was promoting before the war. But now, after 2 years of this terrible war, we really have to support the independence of the free nations of Russia.
Okay, personally, I don't share this opinion, because I think that these forums, they're totally ineffective, unlike the forums which people in Vilnius organize, so-called Russian opposition, etc. Because from what I see and what I read, Russia now has doubled its military budget and feel okay, even though Russia is engaged in the big war with Ukraine. So I think that we have to face somewhat a reality that the West postponing delivery of weapons for Ukraine, and that's why Russia had time to boost its own military production capacity. So what we see now, drones, etc. So, but let's go forward. Alexei Arestovich, you know him personally. As far as I understand, you met him several times. He is a prominent Ukrainian activist. He said that in 2008, NATO slapped the door into Ukrainian face when refused to grant a membership plan for Ukraine and Moldova. So Ukraine at the time had to acknowledge the lesson, had to understand that it has to conduct its own policy beyond European Union and NATO. For instance, today we heard Mr. Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, told that Azerbaijan is not going to join the European Union. Actually, we're not interested in. We have our own policy, and we will go policy. So, what do you think in reality? Is is Arestovich right or wrong in his opinion?
Look, for Azerbaijan, I don't know, because first of all, I'm very critical to Azerbaijan having attacked this region of Nagorno-Karabakh, and nobody has invited Azerbaijan to EU. You know, it's completely out of question at the moment. You know, they can achieve is a status like Turkey. They could, under theoretical circumstances, if they change, then join NATO, and also then be part of the customs union. But I'm much more in favor of Armenia joining NATO and breaking with Russia, because we should push Russia out of the Southern Caucasus completely. And I hope that will be the result of the deliberations in Baku and in Yerevan. When it comes to Ukraine in 2008, you know, the problem was more or less our answer to the Orange Revolution already. We should have supported the Orange Revolution in 2006, and when they were consolidated, they wanted to join the European Union, and that would have been the solution for the Orange Ukraine, and that would have avoided the war. You know, that was very clearly. And of course, when we then considered, because the EU was rejecting Ukraine for the EU membership, and then the Americans have said, now let's try it with NATO membership, because that's very good. But then the Europeans were opposing that in 2008, the French and the Germans, and then the Russians basically started immediately the attack in Georgia. So when we invite somebody to NATO, we have to do it like in Finland. we have to give implicit security guarantees in the moment of invitation. Because when we say Ukraine wants to come, and then we say yes, theoretically yes, but not really, then we leave Ukraine in the limbo. And that was the big mistake. Because you wanted to join, we said theoretically yes, because it was not a slamming of the door in the face. It was a theoretically yes, but not now and not at this condition. And so then Putin basically used this kind of vacuum and has pushed inside in 2014 and in 2022 because he was sure the Europeans and Americans will not really defend Ukraine. But in reality, in 2014, we were very surprised and incapable. In 2022, we were also quite surprised, but not so much surprised. And Ukraine was much better prepared. And also we were much able to, at least militarily, in terms of defense, to deliver at least some support in terms of technology, assistance financially, and also industrially. So we have not abandoned Ukraine in the hours of need. And ultimately, what Putin has tried in the war, he has failed. You know very well, and the invasion has basically failed. He got another 10% of Ukraine temporarily, and I'm not belonging to the people who say the counteroffensive is lost. We will see how this winter will work out on the battlefield, and it is a very difficult condition for Ukraine. I know that, and for the Ukrainian people, but it's even much harder for the Russian army in Ukraine in hostile territory in this winter. They will be under very, very big pressure. So let's see how ultimately this war will end. And I'm very optimistic that we will still win, that Ukraine will win. And I believe in that. When it comes to NATO membership, I have also put the flag here. I think NATO membership is absolutely what Ukraine needs. And not after the war, but now NATO membership must be promised. Ukraine needs a NATO membership action plan and a clear promise that Ukraine will join NATO. That must come over the lips of the Western leaders. That must be in the resolution of the meetings. And of course, Putin cannot escalate the war because he's already escalating all the time. You have a lot of counterattacks in Bakhmut everywhere. So he's anyhow trying his maximum to create damage and to wage havoc on the Ukrainian front line, but he's not succeeding. And the fact is that we have to promise a NATO membership as one way to make it very clear that we will anyhow never give up, which we anyhow will never do. So we stand with Ukraine 100%, and you will see that we will win together. And institutionally, and also from the defense industrial point, we must make sure that the Ukrainians believe us, that they will join, that you will join NATO and EU, and the way to do it is to say it and to make decisions. Of course, Ukraine cannot join immediately by tomorrow, but I remind everybody, also Western Germany joined, and also Cyprus joined the EU, for example. So there's many precedences where we can rely on and when we can work with. And of course, Ukraine is a situation sui generis in many ways. But nevertheless, we must say that Ukraine's future is very clearly in NATO, and many of the NATO officials do say that already. And we need it also to hear from the American president, from the American presidential candidates, and we need to hear it also from the European leaders. And this is the clear way of Ukraine in NATO and the European Union, and also, as I have said many times on your show already, inside the Euro. And this is exactly what's going to happen.
Well, personally, I rely on an article which was published by Chief Commander Mr. Zaluzhny, who stipulated that now there is a strange situation when, let's say, there is a stall from both sides, so both sides can find an exit from this situation. And if West postponed to provide Ukraine proper technologies, then in the long run, Russia will be, enough equipped in order to continue its assault over Ukrainian territory. So this was what Chief Commander Mr. Zaluzhny suggested. So bearing in mind his words, I obviously share your opinion regarding European integration, NATO integration, but Or to be honest with you, I think that NATO now is totally incapable of providing security for Ukraine, because we even don't know how NATO would react if, for instance, Russia would invade Lithuania or Latvia, for instance. I doubt that European countries would send troops to protect Baltic countries. We never know this. So, what I try to suggest that it seems to me that Western countries, they continue to live the life they used to live before the Russian invasion into Ukraine. They don't want to put their economy on military basis. They don't want to facilitate military production. So, it seems to me that Western countries, they pretend that they help Ukraine, but in reality, they play sneaky game.
I understand, it's now winter and the counteroffensive was not the one big success everybody has hoped, yeah. But it's not a reason to somehow be in a negative mood here. The situation could have been already much better. I agree, and I've said it already before. But the fundamentals are true. First of all, let's not be here critical towards NATO's defense guarantee towards Lithuania and Estonia. Absolutely, NATO will defend Estonia and Lithuania and all her members. NATO will defend 100%. Yeah, and you can be sure American troops will fight for NATO's defense, and also ultimately we are a nuclear armed alliance, and we will defend all our territory. There's no doubt about it. And there will be also very clear reciprocity in the military responses if ever the Russians will enter European or NATO territory. They will not, and that's absolutely for sure. So don't worry about that one. The other thing is, yeah, of course, you're right to be critical that we should put our society and our economy on a more war footing alike future, like we have seen also in Poland. They are really putting much more money into defense. And you know very well that I'm critical to Austria because we are not in NATO and we are not joining. We don't send any equipments. And you know that I'm also very critical that I have called from the beginning that the war will be much more expensive, that we have to call it a war because it's a war. The Europeans say it's not our war. This is very wrong. It's our war, definitely. It's our money, it's our technology, it's our people. The Ukrainians, we want to have them in the European Union. So you are Europeans, you will be EU citizens. So we have to put more money, more hardware, more effort into winning this war. And this will be ultimately the result in 2024, because we have been only gradually engaging. And this is very unfortunate. I'm also very critical. But let's not somehow, in this end of the year, December situation, as it is at the moment, it's also a bit about budgeting and about raising the funding in the United States and in the European Union. And it's, of course, a little bit of a gloomy outlook at the moment, raises the crisis level in Washington, Brussels, Berlin, and in Paris, in order to really provide significant funding for 2024, which Ukraine needs to keep the country going and also to win the war. And this will be ultimately positive. I'm sure the decision in Washington and in Brussels will be very positive. You will get the money you need. You will get also more weapons. It's a debate and the process which is going painfully slow. I know that I can just apologize and try to explain it. And it's true, we have not really won the war, the pro-Ukraine, and not the war on the public policy in the public debate. I tried to really my best throughout 2023 to make it very clear that Ukraine's victory is our victory, and we have to bring money and weapons into Ukraine as much as possible. And I think we have delivered significant amounts in terms of money and weapons. Obviously, I was also thinking in 2022, when President Biden has started the so-called Land Lease Act, that we will really ramp up production significantly. But on the other hand, we have also significantly brought ammunition, weapons, and so on. And the truth is, we were unprepared for the scale of the challenge and for the task, and still we are now, for example, the 50 billion which the EU wants to give and Hungary wants to block. So it's still only about 10% what we should prepare, because the whole cost of reconstruction of winning the war is much closer to 1 trillion euros and then to 50 billion. But step by step, of course, in democracies, the process is always complicated. And this is, of course, not what the Ukrainians want to hear. But ultimately, we will live up to our challenge and the free world will win and Russia will be defeated. And I can just always come back to the economic, industrial, fiscal fundamentals. Russia is a rather smallish economy compared to us. And they have, of course, put a major effort now into the Ukraine war. They really budgeted a lot of money in 2024. And somehow Western policy makers are really a little bit slow to respond. It's very disappointing, actually. But we will respond, and they will grow to the challenge. And you will see in 2024, there will be already a very different situation, both in the political and on the battlefield as well. And this next months will bring major progress for all of us.
Mr. Ferklinger, thank you very much for this interview. Mr. Ferklinger, Günther Ferklinger, the prominent activist for Ukraine in EU and Ukraine in NATO.
NATO.
Thank you.
And in the Euro.
NATO. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interview. Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава. Thank you very much, Mr. Ferklinger. Send me the link, okay, with the video. I will post tomorrow.
Okay, thanks a lot. I will send you. Thanks for the interview. Bye to Odessa.